Hello everyone and welcome to All Things Watched. In this video we are going to talk about the brand new movie Finestkind, and this movie mainly starred Ben Foster, Toby Wallace, Jenna Ortega, Tommy Lee Jones, and Ismael Cordova, and Aaron Stanford, and of course Scotty Tovar. And Tim Daly was in here as well, but he's not really in here a whole lot. And actually, Tommy Lee Jones and even Jenna Ortega were not in this movie as much as I would have thought they would have been either, but they are still, they do play bigger roles than Tim Daly. Or Daly, and so essentially, what the movie is about, it's about this group of fishermen who are out, obviously, and these are American fishermen or citizens of the U.S., and so they're out trying to, catch a bunch of fish and I guess meet their quotas for the end of the year and whatnot, and so they're not really catching as many fish as they would have hoped, and so they're fishing very close to the Canadian border, and so basically the crew, which is basically the captain of the boat is Tom, and his brother Charlie, and those two characters are portrayed by Ben Foster, who plays Tom, and Toby Wallace plays Charlie, and in the movie they're brothers, and Tom is the captain of the boat, and so he decides, well, let's cross the line, let's go into Canadian territory, let's go up north and fish the Canadian waters, and we'll see if we can get some good haul and get a good really meet their quota and get a good healthy catch of fish. Obviously, fishermen need to catch fish in order to make money, and so essentially that's what the idea is. Tom says, let's take a chance, let's go into Canadian waters and see what we can do. Now, of course, you don't have to be a genius to figure out that this is, of course, breaking a lot of laws. One, they're poaching because they're probably catching fish that are not entitled or licensed to catch, and then, of course, they're catching these fish in Canada, so, there's just a whole bunch of charges and whatnot, which really goes against it. It really goes against this, and beyond just poaching the fish, even just the fact that they're going into another country's territory and all this kind of stuff. And so what happens is when Tom and his crew goes into the Canadian waters to catch these fish, of course the Canadian Coast Guard ends up catching them, and they get absolutely hammered and nailed with a massive fine. And so that is essentially what this movie is about. It's about that crew who gets caught and gets a very hefty fine for fishing in territories that they were not allowed to fish in, which essentially makes them poachers because they really had no right to the fish that they were catching because they weren't supposed to be there. And so they get hit with this huge $100,000 fine, and so now they have to sort of figure out how to get out of debt and how to pay off that fine, which ends up making them spiral into a life of crime and chaos. Now, Tommy Lee Jones' character, he portrays a character known as Eldridge, and he's actually Charlie and Tom's father, or at least Tom's father. I think Charlie and Tom. Well, hang on, I can't remember if they were literally brothers or if they're just brothers, as in like friends who are so close that are brothers. I can't remember. Maybe there is no relation between them. I'm thinking that there was, but now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think there was, because Charlie's father was the character portrayed by Tim, who's Gary, and then Tom's father was Eldridge, portrayed by Tommy Lee Jones. Yeah. So Tommy Lee Jones's character essentially was the character who owned the boat originally, and so he owns the boat that Tom and Charlie and the other fishermen are out fishing on. So that's Tommy Lee Jones' character in the movie. He plays Tom's father. Now, Jenna Ortega, she portrays a character known as Mabel, who is dating Charlie. And so Mabel comes from a little bit of a broken family as well, given the fact that her mother is somewhat of I guess you would say, a drug abuser or a substance abuser. She's basically a drug addict. And so this is sort of how Charlie and Tom get sucked into a world of chaos and a world of crime to try to pay off this massive fine. This massive debt is basically because of Mabel's connections that she has to these, to the drugs and these drug lords and whatnot. And so that's essentially what the story is about. It's about them basically using this connection of Mabel to try to pay off their fine by doing things even more illegal than what they had already done. And so it was really fun to see these characters, really make all the continue to make all these bad choices, which would eventually lead their lives, make their lives spiral into more and more crime, more and more chaos, with some extreme consequences by the time you get to the very end of the movie. Major consequences that affects all the characters, including the parents of including Eldridge, Gary, Charlie, Tom, Mabel, and all the characters are really affected by these decisions that they decide to make. So in terms of performances, I really liked everyone's performance. I thought the cast did a great job with what they were given, especially Tommy Lee Jones. I actually wish he was in the movie a little bit more. Jenna Ortega, I think, was used in a really good way in this movie, because she's probably one of the bigger stars in the movie now in terms of star power. I mean, I know Tommy Lee Jones is by far probably the biggest, but let's be honest, Tommy Lee Jones is, he is getting a little older now, and Jenna Ortega is sort of on that rise. She's sort of becoming a superstar, especially from her shows like Wednesday. And so the way that they use her character in this movie, I thought was very clever. She's in there just enough to have that star power, but not enough to overpower Ben Foster or Toby Wallace, who are really what the two main characters of the movie, in which the story is being told from their perspective, and we're following their story, and it really is their story. So I really liked how they utilized the characters and used the actors, and I thought all the performances were done really, really well. Now, the biggest flaw that I had with the movie, the biggest problem I had with the movie, was the very ending, with how the sort of conflict of the movie ended up being resolved. I was not a huge fan with how they ended the movie and how they resolved this final conflict, literally right down to pretty well the final scene, which takes place in a diner, revolving a bunch of characters. Pretty well all the characters are there. At least Charlie's there, Tom's there, Eldridge is there, and a few other characters are there as well, which are from the criminal world, and how the conflict was resolved. It was resolved in a way which I kind of wish I just felt like it was very anticlimactic. I felt like they kept building up towards this conflict that was going to happen between the fishermen and these drug dealers or drug lords, whatever you want to call them. And then once it came time to actually see the conflict, then I felt like it was very anticlimactic because of how they ended it, and sort of the actions that another character takes sort of on their own to, I guess, to sort of protect their children. And that's really how far I can go without spoiling the movie for you. But I wasn't really a big fan of the resolution of the conflict. I wish that it had have continued to escalate, and I wish it had become more of sort of like a gang war type thing, where there would have been a lot more action, where they would have had to fight their way out of the situation, as opposed to it ending the way that it did. And so with that being said, I would give Finestkind probably a 60% rating. I still recommend you watch it. I still thought it was a great movie. I just wasn't satisfied with how the conflict was resolved. And so that's my review for Finestkind. Let me know in the comment section below if you've seen it, and if you liked it, tell me why or why not. If you like this video, click the subscribe button, and until the next one, take care.